Fowler, I'll remind you that you remain under oath.
Yeah.
Be seated.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Mr. Narkunis, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Fowler.
Morning.
My name's Stan Norkunis, and along with Sam Morrissey and Liam Scully, we represent Judy Church in these matters. And I'd like to ask you a few questions here about your relationship with your father.
Sure.
And you had indicated you believed when Mr. Camilio asked you about that it was reasonably good, correct?
Yeah.
But there were times when, as in any relationship, that wouldn't have been as good, correct?
Sure.
And there were a couple times, or at least one particular time in 2020, when the two of you weren't talking, right?
Yes.
And nor were you seeing each other, correct?
Yes.
And how long did that extend for?
Maybe a year or two.
Okay. And that was at your instigation, correct? You had indicated to your father you didn't want to have any contact with him for a period of time, correct?
It's kind of both, I would say, not just one-sided.
Okay. Now, the relationship with your father, at some point in time, you and he moved in with Julie Haskins, correct?
Who?
Julia Hawkins, correct?
We moved in with her?
Yes.
Yeah, when I was a child.
And how old were you?
It was maybe. Well, I seen him often. It was weird. So I lived with my aunt when my mother passed away, and then I see my father on the weekends until I was probably around 10, maybe 12.
But you considered, I believe you said, as to Julia Hawkins, you considered her to be your stepmother, correct?
Yes, sir. My mother died when I was a child.
Okay. And therefore you had great affection for her, correct?
Of course.
And in the context of living there, your father lived there with you and her and Michael Hawkins for a period of time?
It was mainly me and her and my father. Michael was an adult at the time, so I mean, he periodically stayed.
And at some point in time then, while you were still living there, your father then left that relationship to begin a relationship with Judy Church, correct?
I wouldn't say he left. It was both, I would say. He was with both of them.
So he was continuing to part time with Ms. Hawkins and then also having a relationship, to your knowledge, with Judy Church at that time.
Yeah, he was with Julie all the way till she passed away.
Okay. Well, during that period of time, all the way till she passed away, he was also seeing Judy Church, to your knowledge, correct?
At times, yeah.
Okay. And where there would be times when he would be gone for 2 or 3 days, and you believed he was with Miss Church during that period of time?
It was hard to say who I believed he was with. My father was with whoever he at the time.
Okay.
It's hard to say like what woman, as much as embarrassing it is, but
Now, following when Ms. Hawkins passed away, you then and your father went to live with Ms. Church? At some point in time, you moved in with Ms. Church, correct?
I lived above with my at the time my son's mother.
Okay. But that was in a home that Ms. Church owned, right? When I say you lived with her.
It was in
the
an
same
apartment.
building?
It wasn't in the same actual apartment at the time, no, but it was in the same, I guess, building.
Well, you had told us that you did live for 1 year in the same unit?
Yeah, that was later on when me and my son's mother split up.
Okay. So when you moved over to with Miss Church, you were living in your separate apartment and you had a companion with you?
Yeah.
Okay. At any point in time, did you feel hostility towards Miss Church because of what your father had done with her while Miss Hawkins was ill?
Nope.
Now, and you think the relationship with your father in 2020 could have lasted for 2 years, that when you no longer were having contact?
It's hard to say. It was before I got married, but yeah, I would say around 2.
Well, did you actually take out any type of paperwork to tell him he couldn't come near you?
Yes.
Okay. Would that have been a restraining order?
Yes.
And that lasted for approximately some extended period of time, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Now, when you were there at that house, and your father was living with Miss Church at that point in time, during some period that you were there as well, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you a couple of photographs and ask you if you can identify the people in those as being
Yeah.
the people that you were with. Give them to you one at a time.
Sure.
First photograph. Be able
Yep.
to identify who's depicted in that picture.
Yep.
Who would that be?
Judy and my father.
Okay. Would you be able to approximate a time that might be? If you can.
He had his white goatee. I know it's a new report, so I would say maybe around 2022, 23.
Okay.
I mean, 20, yeah, maybe 21, 22.
Okay. If I could be marked, Judge.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
It may be admitted.
Judge, when they're all three are done, I'd like to be able to display them to the jury on the. They show you in a second.
You may do so.
You're going to identify the people that are depicted in that photograph.
I can't see the guy in the back, but it's my father and Judy.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know who, like, those other people are.
Approximately the same time frame, perhaps.
No, this was before. This was when they first kind of started dating, because it was my father's old motorcycle.
Okay.
So this is when he was with Julie.
I'd move that into evidence, Judge.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
Exhibit 10, so not.
And finally, this photograph.
Yep, that's Judy and my father. I want to say this one's more recent. I think this is when they were in Florida.
Would that have been 2022?
Yeah, I don't want to say specifically because I don't know the exact date, but maybe 21, 22, yeah. Because I know they visited a few times.
I'd move that photograph, Judge, into evidence.
No objection? Exhibit 11.
If I could display those to the jury through the E-mode or L-mode, Judge,
Yes, you may.
assuming I can. How do you get that too?
The younger generation goes to work. Thank you, Ms. Morrissey.
That's good.
Is that good?
This is which exhibit was just up there? Just tell us which exhibit's on the screen
That's,
at any time.
Number 9
Number 9. Okay.
and number 10. And finally, number 11, Judge. Thank you. Now, you had indicated that I think you're working construction, correct? Some sort of construction aspect?
At what time?
In 2022,
No, I was working for the same company I work for now.
which I thought that it dealt with construction and you were management.
It wasn't
What is it exactly? that your company-
So basically, I go around properties that my company owns that other people can't figure something out or need help. I'll go there to problem solve. Sometimes it could be construction, plumbing, but not really a construction company.
All right, but facility management could be a better term for it.
Sure.
Okay. And I think you had told us back on Wednesday, November 10th, you had been in contact with your father about collecting some money for one of the projects you had him work on.
Yeah, I had to pay him for it.
Okay. And that would have been the same thing, some sort of facility management project?
No, that was separate. That was on the side, and nothing to do with my company that I work for.
But you did indicate that your father was doing some jobs for your company, right? You did. Occasionally, you'd be able to give him a day's job?
I would give him a day's job that was separate from my company, but never with the company that I work for, no.
Oh, all right. Okay. And those would be the same thing, some sort of, if I say construction, might be
Yeah.
rebuilding something, reconstructing something, not a huge project, right?
Yeah, my father was mainly good at construction, like framing, et cetera, stuff like that, windows, siding.
Okay. Labor intensive.
Sure,
Okay.
at points.
In September, October, November of 2022, you were giving him work such as that?
One job, yes.
Okay. More than one job?
Nope, just that one.
All right. That you were collecting the money for?
Yep.
And to your knowledge, was he otherwise doing any type of work?
I'm not sure. I didn't really ask. I mean, I knew he always had little things going on, but he didn't have any like jobs that I knew about.
Okay, but he was still physically active during that period of time.
To an extent.
Yeah. All right. And he was also, were you familiar with the fact that he was also redoing bicycles?
Yeah, he told me about that.
Okay. Was he himself riding bikes?
Never that I seen.
How often would you be in contact with your father on a weekly basis?
Prior to the disagreement we had,
Yeah. Well, from, say, in 2021, 2022.
I would say at least once a week, sometimes more through text. I didn't always see him every week, but I mean, we communicated through text or, other things. He would show me what he found at yard sales and stuff.
So once a week, you might have seen him. You might have had a text message with him, right?
Yeah, once a week, because he would stop by and, see my son as well at times.
Okay. Now, and during this period of time, you also maintained a friendly relationship with Barbara Randell, correct?
Sure, yeah.
And that was the other lady that your father at that point in time was seeing along with Judy Church, right?
One of them, yes. Yeah.
Okay. When you say one of them?
Well, yeah, one of Judy or Barbara.
Okay. But you were having a relationship with both.
Yeah.
What's the period of time that you were actually living at 108 Central Street? Do you remember the years?
I don't want to say I don't know the specific year.
But would that have been prior to 2019?
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Okay. Would it have been back as early as 2017?
It could have been, yeah.
Okay. And you stayed there for, was it 1 year upstairs and 1 year downstairs?
Yeah, upstairs, but then intermittently downstairs. I would go to friends' houses or etc.
When you was downstairs?
Yes.
Okay. And it's during that time frame then, maybe back to 2017, that you saw the photograph, that was displayed in the photograph of the Voodoo doll?
Can you rephrase it again?
Mr. Camilio had showed you a picture. Let me show you that to you. It's been marked as exhibit number 7.
Yep.
Just ask you to look at that for a moment yourself. You had said you would indicate that you were able to identify that, and that was something that you saw in the home at 108 Central Street, right?
Yeah, one of them.
Okay. back in, and that would have been in the 2017 timeframe when you were there?
I don't remember specifically, but there
You
was,
weren't there in 2020, right?
well, as long as I wasn't there in 2020, but I still see my father on occasions after, yes.
Well, but you had the restraining order in 2020, right?
Yes.
All right. So you wouldn't have been seeing your father at that location in 2020, right?
I sometimes did, yeah.
And then 2021, this restraining order was still in effect, right?
Yep.
So that's prior to 2020, you would have seen that item.
Prior to 2020. I mean, she had multiple. This wasn't the only one. So you're asking me like there was multiple different dolls. Wasn't just that one.
I want you to, did you ever take your father for any of his medical appointments?
Sometimes I drove him, yeah.
Okay. And would you go in and listen to what any of the conversations with the doctor?
In the beginning I did when he first he had a bicuspid valve in the beginning.
Well, he had a pacemaker, and right?
Due to the bicuspid valve, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, going into November of 2022, at some point in time on November 12th, you received a text message from Judy Church, correct?
Yep.
And in response to that, you were somewhat upset that you had gotten a message which you thought was late, correct?
Sure, yeah.
And your initial reaction to that, as you had stated when you were interviewed by the police, was you thought your father was in the hospital perhaps for a drug overdose, right?
I mean, yeah.
And and therefore you weren't overly concerned because you thought perhaps that at that point in time he would be getting released from the hospital pretty shortly, right?
I thought he would.
Your father, if it was a drug overdose, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and in fact, one of the concerns you had was when your father became mad, you have seen him on occasion use excessive amounts of drugs, right?
I would know he's not excessive, but I mean, yeah, he would do drugs.
Well, at one point in time, you were interviewed by the police, and they recorded that interview, correct?
Yeah.
And did you have a chance to look at that before coming into court here today?
What, the transcripts?
Yes.
I've seen them.
Okay. And if I suggested to you that you had said he's been mad enough where I've seen him use excessive amounts of drugs.
Yeah.
So when you first heard about that he was in the hospital, that was your issue. You thought it was that type of consideration, right?
Yeah, it would have made more sense.
And then the aspect, your father unfortunately deteriorated, his health diminished, right?
Yep.
And then following, as that was taking place, you were contacted by someone to come talk to the police, right? Sometime in November 12th, you were asked to go somewhere and meet with some police officers, right?
Yes, after I called them.
Okay. And where did you go?
To my Uncle Billy's house.
That would be William Eaton,
Yep.
correct? Okay. Now, and present when you got there was who else? Was Tammy there?
Yep.
And Mr. Eaton was there?
Yep.
You and who else?
We were there. It was my Uncle Billy and his wife, Jessica.
Okay. But in terms of who the police talked to, at the house, they talked to three of you, correct?
Yes.
and they told you they were going to record your statements, correct?
Yep.
And at that point in time, they told you we're going to answer questions, and feel free to, whatever your answers we want or whatever else you want to talk to us about, go ahead and say it, right?
Yeah.
And you were with them for approximately 45 minutes, right?
It sounds about right. Yeah.
And prior to coming in there, had there been a discussion through Tammy Carbone about Judy making statements relative to milkshakes?
Not discussion. I mean, it was brought up. Yeah.
So you knew prior to coming in there that Tammy had said she had had conversations with Judy or swapped emails, and they talked about her making coffee milkshakes for your father, and the family joke was she was poisoning him by giving him protein, right?
Poison him by giving him protein.
Giving him a milkshake.
Wasn't a family joke, but it was said.
Well, that had been said for how many years?
I don't know how many years, maybe by a year or two leading up to it. I wouldn't say years.
Well, didn't your father like his coffee milkshakes?
My father liked anything that was sweet.
Well, the specific question was he really liked his coffee milkshakes, right?
Sure.
And he told you that, right?
Yeah.
And the coffee milkshakes were something that Judy gave to him, correct?
She would, yeah.
Well, and she had been doing that for years, right?
Sure, yeah.
And because it was a coffee milkshake and not one of his other drinks, they referred to it as that she was giving him some sort of poison because it was a coffee milkshake, right?
I don't understand the question.
Well, sorry. His other favorite drinks were fruit punch Powerade, right?
Yeah.
Which is bright red, right?
Yep.
And
Drink.
you've seen him drink that, correct?
I've seen him drink many Powerades. He worked outside.
And the other was Fanta soda, correct?
Fanta soda or root beer. Anything.
Well, Fanta
anything
soda is,
like
what color
Pepsi.
is Fanta soda?
Fanta soda?
Fanta, F-A-N-T-A.
Talking about the orange kind? It would be orange.
It's orange, right?
Yes.
And even the can is bright orange, right?
In a bottle? Yeah.
Okay. And those were his three favorite drinks. The red Powerade, fruit punch Powerade, orange Fanta,
His
and the coffee milkshake, right?
favorite drink was milk or like chocolate milk, yeah. But they were one of them. I mean, he had many favorite drinks.
Well, but one of the those were the three principal ones for him, correct?
Sure.
And not just a milkshake, but it had to be a coffee milkshake, correct?
Didn't have to be, no.
Well, wasn't the joke that he was getting coffee milkshakes, correct?
Coffee or chocolate, yeah.
And so all of you were together in the room at that point in time at Mr. Eaton's house, and you were all expressing your views about,
Well,
right? Let me finish the question
Yep.
for you. You're all expressing your views about conversations Judy would have with other family members about the coffee milkshakes she made for your father, right?
no, we weren't all together in the room at the same time having that
Well-
conversation.
You were all at the house, right?
So my house was adjacent to Billy's, and I wasn't in there until I was speaking, and they took us all in one at a time. So we didn't all like sit in the living room and talk, no.
But you knew the purpose of being there. You were all together, and you all had conversations before you talked to the police and after you talked to the police, right?
Sure.
It's your aunt, it's your uncle, and it's you, and there's a great worry about your father, and all of you are having conversation, right?
Yeah, but it was happened fairly quickly to have like sit down. I didn't speak to them a lot prior. I just showed up to talk to the police after I called them.
Well, but you also had your aunt there and you had your uncle there, right?
Sure.
And they were very worried about your father, right?
Yeah, of course.
And you're worried about your father, right?
Yeah.
And your family, so you have conversations, right? About that situation.
I mean, not after I talked to my aunt. Yeah, after the police. We were kind of trying to figure out what was going on. Yeah, of course.
But you had talked to both of them before you got there about your father as well, right?
Sure. Not in great detail, but
Particularly
yeah.
Tammy, right?
I talked to Tammy, yeah, of course.
When in terms of conversations, a lot of it might have been text messaging, which is still communication, right?
Yeah, I talked to Tammy through text.
And in the context of that was the issue that arose about what about these statements that the coffee milkshakes were poison for him, right?
Yeah, it was brought up.
Well, it was brought up by you, it was brought up by Tammy, and it was,
Yeah.
right? And then the police suddenly decided to focus on that, right? It occurred in terms of conversations with you. When had you heard that statement? When had you not heard that statement, right?
Yeah.
And again, you ensured that you told them that was one of your father's favorite drinks for his, right?
One of his favorite.
And had been so for years, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you were there, again, there were no restraints on you in terms of what you could say in response to a question, right?
No.
They weren't trying to limit you down to what you could say.
No.
They were asking you if you had any other information that could help them in trying to determine, if you had any information of how your father could have consumed ethylene glycol, right?
Yep.
And was there a discussion then that ethylene glycol had a particular taste? Did they tell you it was a sweet tasting substance?
Well, I don't know if they told me,
Ethylene glycol?
but I knew about it. I was a mechanic for years, so.
So you knew it was a sweet tasting substance, right?
Sure.
And you knew your father had a particular taste for sweet tasting items, right?
Yeah.
And following that interview with the police at that point in time, did you ever go back and give them any other information that would relate to your father's consumption of sweet products, his appetite for products that were sweet?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It was a long time ago.
Okay. So that statement was on November 12th of 2022. And then in March of 2026, you went in for an additional interview with the government, right?
With the,
Last week, the government talked to you. The prosecutors talked to you, right? Brought you in and talked to you, right?
no, I talked to them on the phone.
Okay. And that would have been on Tuesday, March 17th.
Yeah.
And they told you what to expect, right?
Sure.
And they also told you for the first time at that point in time, in March 17th, 2026, that there's going to be a discussion about a bitter tasting compound that may have been found in the Powerade bottle, right?
I don't think they told me about they found a bitter agent, but I mean, it was brought up, yeah.
All right. Well, it was brought up, okay?
They didn't
That's
say
gonna
it was,
happen.
yeah.
And at that point in time, then, on March 17th, 2026, upon hearing that, you told them that you currently then, in March 17th, 2026, had remembered a couple of times your father complained about a loss of taste, right?
Sure. Yep.
And you had no time frame, right?
What do you mean I had no time frame?
Well, you didn't tell them, I heard this back in 2017 from him, or I didn't hear it until...
Well, it would have been during COVID, which was 2020, somewhere around there.
Well, it would have been difficult for you to hear it then because you had a restraining order against your
spoke
father
to my
and you were
father.
staying away from each other, right?
Still spoke to him, yes.
Well,
He's my father.
and so you believe it could have taken place in 2020 during the period in which you had the restraining order against your father, right?
Say it again?
The only time you have a memory of when that would have taken place would have been sometime in 2020.
And not the only memory, no.
Well,
I
that's
said,
the
I
only time
spoke-
you've mentioned, right?
Spoke to my father countless times.
Okay. And so what may have occurred in 2020, and your statement was, to the best of your memory, complained that he had a loss of taste. He was still drinking coffee milkshakes, right, in 2022, right?
Still drinking
Distinctive
anything. Yeah.
taste to a coffee milkshake, right?
Sure.
And it had to be coffee milkshake for your father, right?
Have to be coffee, no.
Well, he was being given coffee milkshakes, right?
Sure.
Fanta has a particular type of taste, right?
We can, yeah.
And Powerade, fruit punch, has a distinct taste. That's why it's called fruit punch, right?
Sure.
And those were drinks your father was consuming and enjoying the taste of them, right?
I don't know if
You
he
would
was
see him
enjoying the
consume
taste.
those, right?
At times, yeah. I mean, he had to drink stuff.
And if I may have a moment, Judge.
Yes, you may.
And the reason that you got the restraining order was you were concerned about any type of physical assault of you by your father, right?
Sure.
And again, back on February 12, 2022, when you were seated with the police at Mr. Eaton's house and you were free to communicate to the police, and they were telling you what their concerns were about how he could have had ethylene glycol, you never mentioned to them anything about your father ever having said he had a loss of taste.
I've brought it up.
In 2020, do you want me to show you the transcript and you can show me where that is?
Know exactly when I brought it up, but yeah, I've said it.
And if I told you it's not in your transcript, you can point it out to me where it is in your
If
transcript.
it's not in there, it's not in there.
It's not in there, correct.
Okay.
And that was a recording of the statements you made to the police, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And that statement is not in there, correct?
Sure.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Judge.
Mr. Camellia.
Just a couple things, sir.
Yeah.
You said that you didn't have any ill will towards Judy before this incident. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was your feelings about your dad, dating Judy or, being in a relationship with her?
In the beginning, I thought she was a good choice.
Why was she a good choice?
She was nice. She had a good job, had a house. She was pleasant.
All right. Did Barbara Randall have sort of some of those things going for her that Judy, you just mentioned about Judy?
No.
Okay. And did you ever talk to your dad about, his relationship with the two of them and sort of choosing one or the other?
Sure.
Okay. And who did who did you push for?
Told him that Judy was the better choice.
Why?
Because she seemed better off in life, like
More money?
money, house. I mean, they seemed happy.
And after after your dad became sick, after you learned that he had this antifreeze in his body, how did you sort of feel about having told your dad that Judy was the better choice?
Something that I feel terrible about now.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Norkunis. Anything further on that?
Nothing, Judge. No additional.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fowler, you may step down.
Thank you, sir.